Welcome to the Explainer. All right, today we are diving deep into a topic that is absolutely essential for any constitutional law student, the very unique, very complex design of Indian federalism. We're going to lean on the work of scholars like Louise Tillon to really get to the bottom of how India's constitution structures the power between the center and the states.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we're going to tackle a really interesting question. Why isn't the word federalism even in the Constitution? Then we'll get into what this term quasi-federal actually means. After that, we'll look at the incredible powers the center holds, how authority is officially divided, and we'll ask just how much of a voice the states really have in Parliament. And finally, we'll go back in time to see how history shaped this whole incredible structure.
All right, first things first, we have to start with a paradox. Everyone talks about India as a federal country. It's one of the biggest examples in the world. Yet, if you actually read the Constitution, you'll find that the word federalism is nowhere to be seen. Now, this wasn't some typo or an oversight. No, this was a very, very deliberate choice. So you open up Article 1 of the Constitution, and right there it says India is a union of states. Now, why that specific phrasing? Why not a federation of states? This choice of words is everything. It's the key that unlocks the framers' entire vision for how power should work between the national government and the states. And who better to explain it than the man himself, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar? He made it perfectly clear. He said the word union was chosen to signal that the Indian Federation is not some kind of contract between states. It wasn't a voluntary club they could just leave. It signifies an unbreakable, indestructible whole. In other words, no state has the right to secede, period. So that deliberate choice of words, that emphasis on being a union, naturally leads us to our next point. How do we even describe this system? It's not a classic federation, so it needed its own category, its own label, to really capture what it is. And the term that really stuck was quasi-federal. You've probably heard this a million times. It was coined by the constitutional expert Casey Ware. He basically looked at India's setup and saw a hybrid. On one hand, you have federal features, like a division of powers, but on the other hand, the central government is so powerful that it starts to look a lot like a unitary state. So, quasi-federal, kind of federal. And this is a really important distinction. Political scientists call India a holding together federation. Now, think about coming together federations like the USA. There, you had independent states that all agreed to join up and form a country. India was the opposite. It was about a single, central authority, the new Indian state, that decided to grant powers to its different regions, mostly as a way to manage its massive diversity and, well, hold the country together.
So this holding together idea means the Constitution has a built-in bias right from the start, a very strong tilt towards the central government. So let's get into the specifics. What are the actual constitutional tools that give the union government so much power? And this slide, wow, this is basically the toolkit for central dominance. You've got Parliament's power to literally redraw the map under Article 3. You've got the sweeping emergency powers in Article 356. Then there's Article 249, which lets Parliament make laws on state subjects. And of course, the huge financial power the center holds over the states. It's a pretty powerful list. This phrase, you've got to remember this one. It perfectly captures the whole power dynamic. An indestructible union of destructible states. Because under Article 3, Parliament can change state boundaries, create new states, even change their names, with just a simple majority vote. They don't even need the state's permission. It means the union is permanent, but the states themselves can be changed or even erased by the center. And if you think this is all just theory, check out this incredible quote from the legendary Naini Palkhavala. He points out that even though industries is technically a state subject, the union can step in and regulate them if it's in the public interest. Well, that clause was used so broadly that, as he said, by the 1980s, the center was regulating things like razor blades. It basically took over a state power without ever needing to amend the Constitution. Okay, so we've established this strong central bias. But how does the Constitution actually draw the lines? How are powers formally divided up? Well, for that, we need to look at the 7th schedule of the Constitution and its 3 famous lists. The whole design is built on this idea of cooperative federalism. You see, the framers were pretty forward-thinking. They knew that the old model, where the national and state governments operate in completely separate boxes, just wasn't practical. So they built a system that forces them to work together, a system that hardwires interdependence and collaboration to achieve national goals.
And this table here, this is the heart of it all. The union list makes sense. It's for big national stuff like defense and currency. The state list covers local issues like police and public health. But for you, as a law student, the concurrent list is where all the drama happens. This is where both the center and the states can make laws on things like criminal law and education. And here's the golden rule you have to remember. If there's a conflict, Article 254 says union law wins.
And now let's talk about the money, because it always comes down to the money, right? This is absolutely critical. The center controls all the major sources of revenue: income tax, corporation tax, you name it. The states simply don't have enough power to raise the money they need to do their jobs. This makes them structurally dependent on getting funds from the center, creating this massive financial power imbalance.
So the center has a ton of legislative power, and it holds the purse strings. So how do the states push back? How do they make their voices heard at the national level? Well, in theory, that's supposed to be the job of the upper house of parliament, the Rajya Sabha. But here's a huge difference you need to know. In the U.S. Senate, a tiny state like Wyoming has the same number of senators as a massive state like California. It's equal representation. Not in India. In the Rajya Sabha, representation is based on population. That means bigger states get way more seats, which kind of defeats the purpose of it being a council of states that protects smaller states' interests. And if that wasn't enough, this idea that the Rajya Sabha represents the states was weakened even more by a super important Supreme Court case. For your exams, you absolutely have to know Kuldeep Nayar versus the Union of India. The court upheld a change in the law that said a Rajya Sabha member no longer has to actually live in the state they represent. So what was the court's logic here? It's a bit tricky, but it's crucial. They said, yes, federalism is a basic feature of the Constitution. You can't get rid of it. But, and this is a huge but, they said that in India, federalism is about the division of legislative power, not about representing specific geographical territories. It's a really important distinction.
So, after all this, you have to be asking, why? Why build a system that's so flexible, so center-heavy, and not really tied to territory? To understand the why behind all of this, we have to go back to the moment of India's birth and the deep, painful scars left by the partition. This timeline tells an incredible story. Look at the dates. In late 1946, the plan was actually for a weak center and powerful states to try and keep the Muslim League on board. But then, boom, June 1947, partition is announced, and the country is torn apart. After that, everything changed. The fear of another rupture, of the country breaking apart again, became this all-consuming obsession for the framers. And that, right there, that became the single guiding principle. Every clause we've discussed, calling it a union, the emergency powers, the center's ability to redraw the map, it was all designed with one ultimate goal in mind: to build a central authority strong enough to hold the new nation together and crush any threat of secession. Okay, let's wrap this up with the key things you need to remember. First, India is a union of states, a term specifically chosen to show it's indestructible. Second, it's a holding together system, what we call quasi-federal. Third, the whole constitution is designed to be flexible and biased towards the center. And finally, all of this was a direct result of the trauma of partition. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. This design, forged in the crisis of the 1940s, has held India together for over 75 years, which is remarkable. But today, as regional identities and aspirations get stronger, is this centralized flexibility a source of strength that allows the country to adapt, or is it becoming a source of friction? That remains the central ongoing debate in Indian constitutional law.